Okay, Srivatsan, you can start. Please play the video.
Over to you, Yaman sir.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of CeRAI Conversations, a webinar series on various facets of responsible AI. I'm Hemant Pandey, I'm CEO of CeRAI, and it's my privilege and honor to kick off this edition of CeRAI Conversations. Well, today it is CeRAI and Bodhan.AI Conversations, and I'll explain shortly. That this series is on responsible AI is hardly surprising, coming from CeRAI, since CeRAI stands for Center for Responsible AI, a part of Advani School of AI at IIT Madras. But this time, we are joining hands with another key organization at IIT Madras. You may be aware that Bodhan AI is the Center of Excellence in AI for Education. As their tagline says, building India's future one learner at a time. Education being the cornerstone of building the future generation, and AI being the biggest game changer in our life today, we dedicate this joint session to exploring the impact of AI in education. I know this is a weekend morning, personal time, so thanks on behalf of all of us at CeRAI and Bodhan AI for taking the time to join us today. You will hear doomsday predictions about AI, that it's taking over humanity in a negative sense. And there are also those who believe AI is the universal remedy, the panacea for humanity, that humans will be 10 times more productive with the help of AI. Rather than subscribing to any of these extreme views, let's focus on bringing the best of AI into humanity in a responsible manner. And what better place to start than the field of education to focus on as necessity as well as for effectiveness, given that education is the grassroots level of future impact. Let me give you more context to this. If we look at the scale and complexity of Indian education, India hosts one of the largest and most complex education systems. More than 250 million school students, over 10 million teachers, multiple boards, hundreds of languages and dialects, an enormous diversity in infrastructure and in, of course, opportunity. So despite the commitment, extraordinary commitment of the educators, we continue to face persistent challenges, uneven learning outcomes, exam-centric learning, teachers' workload, limited personalization, gaps between policies' intent and the reality of the classrooms. So the key question before us is, can AI helps us move from mass teaching to meaningful, personalized learning at scale? At the same time, equally importantly, can we build AI systems for education that are trustworthy, inclusive, transparent, and aligned with human learning? So the real problem in India is not the content. We got excellent textbooks, videos, platforms like Diksha and so on, question banks, online courses. Yet students struggle in understanding, they're overcoming language barriers, and so on. Teachers struggle to translate the content into knowledge for the students and to be the guides and mentors that they need to be. So the shift that is required is how from how do we provide content to how do we support learning. In other words, how do we move beyond imparting content to educating, and how we move beyond studying and learning. And that's where I think AI can step in practically. So the two big opportunities of AI. One is enabling the teachers, not replacing them. Globally, there is misconception that AI would replace teachers. But in India, it can multiply them. It must multiply them. So our teachers handle large classrooms, assessment, administrative burden, parental expectations, curriculum pressures. So AI can ease this by generating differentiated material, spotting misconceptions early, creating multilingual explanations, and so on. So teachers stay central, and AI can make that impossible possible at scale in India. Second big opportunity, enabling the students rather than serving as intellectual detriment to them. Again, there is a fear of detrimental effect of AI tools at the hands of students. Like asking GPT at the drop of a hat can lead to reduced critical thinking, reduced creativity, cognitive decline, let alone being blissfully unaware that AI models can provide wrong results based on the bias or inadequacy of the data sets. There are academic integrity issues leading to plagiarism, unfair advantage in assessments, and so on. So, and disparity of availability of good tools can widen the gap among students. So in the presence of these risks, let's still not lose sight of potential of AI. There is personalized learning. AI tools can adjust the pace and complexity. Okay. Tailored feedback, identify knowledge gaps. Chatbots and tutors can provide immediate help, 24/7 accessibility and assistance on demand in different ways, like text to speech, multilingual support, and things like that. And of course, with all the power channelized through AI tools, clearly there is potential for increase in productivity and enhanced understanding. So how do we arrest the risks and exploit that potential? This is still an open question, but it's not as if there are no answers at all. Whether it is for educators or students, there is a path to follow, which would involve developing AI literacy for teachers, for students, use AI as assistant, not replacement. And last but not the least, build it responsibly, curate the data sets, critically evaluate AI generated content to ensure accuracy, and so on. That having said, let's first take a look at some specific instances of deploying AI for education in a real world situation. Our first speaker will share her experience in that context. And we'll follow that up with a conversation between two thought leaders from IIT Madras on how we can redefine or reimagine education with the help of AI and deployed responsibly. Before we start, I want to say a few things about the webinar. The audience, of course, is always going to be in silent mode at all times as a feature of Zoom webinar. But at any point of time, you can log in your questions in the Q&A window. We'll take those questions at the end of each of the two sessions. We'll try to address as many questions as possible, but we are going to be limited by the time which has been allotted to the session. And now, let me hand over to my colleague, Dr. Soumya Sundaram, to anchor the session with our invited speaker, Ms. Swati Vasudevan, who's the MD of Khan Academy India. So, Swati, Soumya, over to you.
Thank you, Hemant sir. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday morning. It's my pleasure to welcome Swati Vasudevan. She is an Indian education leader and business executive who serves as the MD of Khan Academy India, as mentioned. And she has over 25 years of leadership experience in both not-for-profit and for-profit scenarios. She has served as the COO of Gates Foundation India Country Office and co-established and managed the Indian School of Public Policy. She has also advised and mentored startups in the edtech and health tech space. And she is an engineer from IIT Delhi and has an MBA from Chicago Booth. So this is a short bio, and I'm excited to see what insight she has for AI in education, especially in the Indian context. Over to you, Swati.
Thanks, Soumya. Hemant, nice to hear you, and thank you for the context setting. Very relatable and very relevant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump right in, since you said we are tight on time. So I'm going to share my screen, and so give me 1 second. I'm hoping you all can see my screen. If somebody could just give me a thumbs
Yes,
up.
we can.
Okay, perfect. So just a quick context on what I'm going to talk about. So Khan Academy, some of you may know, has an AI tool called Khanmigo, which acts as both a digital teacher assistant and a Socratic AI tutor for any learner. And I specifically use the word learner because learning is age agnostic, not just children, but adults can learn as well. So students and teachers both have been seen to benefit from it. Learning never stops, as they say. So what I'm going to talk about is what we have done with Khanmigo in India. We've in some ways pioneered use of AI or deployment of AI in education in the space in India through bringing in Khanmigo on the ground in underserved settings, public school setups, which is government schools in India, in partnership with state governments. And we started doing this about now 1.5 years ago, nearly 2. And we've done this in a very, very thoughtful manner, slowly, and not in a one size fits all, or just bring it in one big chunk in an irresponsible way. That's not the approach we have followed. We wanted to be very responsible in how we deployed it, back to what Hemant was saying, and really figure out what works and what doesn't work. And that's kind of been the philosophy behind how we have brought it into India. And we're exclusively focused on the underserved segment at this time. So it is not available for B2C or individual learners like you and I to sign up for as yet. We are bringing it exclusively for government, through the government systems and administration to the students. So very controlled manner, very, very responsible manner. I'm going to share with you what the numbers look like so far. So Khanmigo has been, as I said, deployed globally, and we brought it into India as well. It is already localized and it works in 30 global languages, and has been tested to be able to handle 3 Indian languages as well. This is in addition to English, Hindi, Odia, and Marathi. There are 1.6 million teachers globally and 200,000 teachers in India that are currently actively using Khanmigo, and 46 million learners globally and 330,000 learners in India that are using Khanmigo at this time as I speak. And as I mentioned, we have brought it into India in a very thoughtful, methodical, step-by-step fashion, in a gradual approach. We started with a pilot with GNV teachers, which was a 6-week-long pilot with a handful of 10 teachers from 10 different schools, 3 districts, to understand how the teachers, what the teachers think and get their feedback on it, which then informed the next pilot in KGBVs, where we expanded it to 61 teachers, and eventually it was picked up by 300 teachers from the same school systems in system KGBV in UP. This is Uttar Pradesh. And it was a 6-month pilot, and the teachers surprisingly, by the end of the pilot, were very adept at using Khanmigo. And these were teachers across 61 schools that started out. And then, of course, it was used by teachers across 300 schools. Then we took it to a pilot of a proper in-field pilot of teachers and students in Adarsh Vidyalayas in Odisha. And this was very heavily informed by what worked and what doesn't work, that insight that we got from the KGBV and the JNV pilots. And here also, Khanmigo was deployed as a part of Khan Academy EdTech platform usage in Odisha, which from the start is a teacher-directed program. So wanted to just highlight that word, teacher-directed. So not only Khan Academy EdTech platform, but also Khanmigo as a result of being deployed in an integrated manner with Khan Academy's EdTech platform, that is also being deployed in a human-directed way and a human-centered way. So this was across 9 schools, 12 teachers, 700 students from across 9 districts. First student pilot that happened in India on AI at a full-fledged kind of a level, used for across different subjects, but mostly focused on maths and science. But it was not restricted to math and science. Then there's a much more deep pilot that's going on in the Akanksha Foundation in Maharashtra. And Karnataka government also tried and experimented with Khanmigo deployment at scale, where the teachers really picked it up. Students' deployment took a much longer time, and that was part of the learning, part of the deployment initiative and pilot. We wanted to see how long does it take to truly deploy it to students at such a large scale, and it pretty much took us a whole year to do that. So the year was used in simply deployment to students, but the teachers did start using it during the school year itself. So just to give you a sense of how Khanmigo has already been deployed on the ground across government schools in partnership with state governments across the country. So now let's step back and let's kind of level set on how do students learn? We all know that students learn more when they're actively engaged with the material to be learned. And secondly, if we can provide them a little bit of support, then and which allows them to work on material that's just at the edge of what they can already do, that pushes them a little bit and stretches their thinking and gets them to move to the next level. Or they also learn when they get that immediate feedback on their responses to any new material that's being learned. And most importantly, when students see value in what they're learning. One of my favorite questions that I've seen students ask Khanmigo when they're they're working on some exercise that their teacher has assigned to them. I sometimes see these students asking, why the hell do I need to learn this? Why do I even have to learn this? Like, why am I being asked to go through this? And you would expect that from students. And Khanmigo responds in a very, very, very responsible way and gives them very hardcore examples from the field that are application oriented on why the topic they're learning could be useful to them in real life. So that's just a classic example, and the students hence are able to see value in what they're learning. So Khanmigo, again, just to give you some context, it is a Socratic tutor. So it's designed in a way that it knows its mathematics well, because that's kind of how it's tested. It's not just a general LLM tool that's, in addition to being used for 100 other things, is also being used for education. That's not the case. This has been designed exclusively for education domain. So, and it sits on top of Khan Academy. It's integrated with Khan Academy's content. So it picks up from Khan Academy's world-class renowned content and not from the World Wide Web or internet and just about anything. So there's a lot of control there. And we know that what it's pulling up in response to a student's question is vetted, ratified, strong, world-class content that's also been in some ways endorsed by the state governments for their respective curricula, which are aligned to their respective state boards. It is a subject matter expert in maths, contrary to what you would normally hear about how LLMs respond on mathematics. So pretty high accuracy there. It The most beautiful thing is it's Socratic. It doesn't give answers, but supports pedagogical rigor, which can be frustrating for students, but that productive struggle, as we all know, is important for students to really be able to learn and engage in that constructive exercise of problem solving, critical thinking, and pushing your thinking a little bit, which is how learning really happens. It is very conversational in nature. It stays on topic. It helps the students stay on topic because students do have a tendency to veer in multiple directions. And it's very encouraging in its responses. And of course, because it's a chat, it's an AI tutor, it's always available on demand. So here are some of the learnings that have come out from our deployment in the field. Khanmigo has demonstrated very strong, when I say strong, measured strong math accuracy and clarity in its responses. And it's able to handle local languages that we've tested that I mentioned, Marathi, Odia, Hindi, even though it was not explicitly trained for the Indian languages, from the get-go. The underlying LLM was not necessarily trained on Indian languages, but Khanmigo is able to handle local languages. So on the accuracy and consistency, Khanmigo does show more than 97% accuracy on math. So that's quite phenomenal for any LLM-based tool. And Khanmigo responds pretty consistently to the same question across different students, which, as we all know, is also a consistently heard problem with any LLM-based tool, any AI tutor, because every time you ask him the same question, it gives you a different response. It does provide pedagogical rigor. So we have seen that 72% of the Khanmigo responses do involve explanations and probing, which indicates that there's a very strong balance of teaching and prompting behavior. So whatever it was designed for, it is exhibiting that behavior in the field with students, with these government school students. It does, on the clarity, tone, and accessibility, we have noticed that 87% of the responses are crystal clear and concise, and only 10% belong in that category of showing some verbosity, which, again, it doesn't mean it's not clear. It is still clear, but it's just a little bit too long for what we believe government school students have the patience to read through and understand. And less than 1% localization issues is what Khanmigo seems to demonstrate in the form of awkward translations or coming up with examples that are out of Indian context and not very contextualized. So all in all, a very solid performance of Khanmigo on the ground as a product and as an offering while interacting with students on the ground in classrooms from government schools. And what we've also seen is in the tests that we conducted that the meaningful engagement for a student really happens when the students sustain that interaction with the chatbot, in this case with the Khanmigo tutor. And that's when the learning really happens. But getting them to that stage is, to me, the holy grail of any AI deployment in education sector in the country. And I would say globally, not just in India. So to me, that remains a primary point of attrition and hence the primary point of focus for us as we go forward in India with Khanmigo. So we saw that 62% of the students were able to engage back and forth with Khanmigo, but only 20% were able to keep their engagement on a sustained enough manner where we believe that, because it's only sustained engagement that yields learning in the form of better skills gained, in the form of truly better understanding of the concept, which shows up in the form of how they answer questions. So that's kind of what we've seen so far. So here are the lessons learned, and here are some of the best practices that we have deployed in the field in response to some of these lessons that we've learned. So first, teachers do need support to move from the EdTech platform familiarity to effective classroom execution of both Khan Academy and Khanmigo. So that capacity building and that hand-holding is absolutely essential. So we are focusing very heavily on professional development for teachers and demonstrating co-facilitation in the classrooms for them to be able to really see how in action how it's supposed to work. Students, again, have a very the whole engagement and learning comes from the student's ability to interact with Khanmigo or any AI tutor in this case which requires them to interact extensively with the student back and forth, right? Be able to have that engagement. And that requires prompting, whether it's verbal, whether it's written, it doesn't matter, because Khanmigo does take verbal cues and verbal prompts as well. And it can read out prompts as well. So it's voice activated along with text activated, but still that ability to come up with prompts and ask questions back and follow up questions, that is a skill in and of itself. And we've seen that students need some help in getting to that point where they are comfortably able to interact with any AI tutor. So we are doing a lot of guided student orientations, demo sessions to model what effective Khanmigo use really looks like for students in the classrooms. Third, we also saw that because it's a human-centered and human-directed deployment in our case, which is the approach we have taken in India, the teachers, or the facilitators become the fulcrum, sit at the fulcrum of this entire equation of learning. And when they are deploying Khanmigo, using Khanmigo to teach their students and then assessing performance, they're looking at the dashboards of how the students are doing. Just looking at the dashboard alone is not enough. There needs to be that second part of the closing of that loop that needs to happen, where the teachers do need to, or the facilitators, whoever is looking at the dashboard, does need to track completion of that. They need to translate that monitoring of the dashboard into instructional action. They need to then come back and assign coursework in Khan Academy EdTech platform to the students in a differentiated manner, as one example. And they need to divide up their students conceptually, just virtually, in these multiple groups of, these are the students who have mastered this topic, these are students who are still struggling, these are students who need some prerequisites first to be secured. So, and Khanmigo helps with all of that. So helping them see the value of Khanmigo to enable them to do that, that is a very strong enablers from what we've seen. And last one is students need to persist independently when they get stuck, and which again doesn't happen naturally, contrary to what you might expect, that it's just a chatbot, it's easy to talk to people. In India, we are argumentative Indians. We like arguments, we like discussions, we like discourse, but not necessarily when it comes to education and learning, especially for a student. From what we have seen, quite the contrary, the students don't like to persist. So yes, on one hand, we want to provide them Socratic tutor, which requires them to persist, but the students don't really want to persist. So it requires that extra nudge it requires an extra nudge to help the students acquire that growth mindset and establish that class routine to be able to engage in that independent thinking. You might be wondering, what are the top use cases for teachers and students? For teachers, they're mostly using it for creating lesson plans. They're using it for multiple choice assessments. And by the way, these are not some things that we've pushed. Khanmigo does have a lot of different tools that teachers can use. And we, of course, train the teachers on using each one of them. But what we found, that these are the ones that are being used the most. They're creating it for creating multiple choice questions, or they're generating more questions for extra practice for the students. And the teachers are also using it to refresh their own knowledge as a teacher. So that's very interesting. I thought you might find that interesting to see. So it's helping the teachers learn as well in a safe environment. And this is based on the survey that we conducted through our deployment efforts and in these systems where we are deploying Khanmigo, where the teachers are using it actively. The survey suggests that majority teachers are finding it very intuitive to use. They're finding Khanmigo to be very supportive of students and helping them be more effective in teaching their students, and it's helping the students learn more effectively. They're also seeing, they're also reporting that they're building confidence in running Khan Academy and Khanmigo integrated classroom for their students, where Khan Academy provides the world-class content and Khanmigo sits on top and helps them to help their students consume that content effectively, safely, responsibly, and in a personalized manner. The teachers also agree that Khanmigo does fit very well within their teaching routines because that's kind of how it's been designed. So the survey does pan out on the usefulness of Khanmigo. And this is just an example of all the tools that Khanmigo offers. These are just a snapshot of tools. There are quite a few other, 50 other tools that Khanmigo does provide, but just to give you a sense of it can, help students do all these things. Our teachers do all these things. Here are some stories from the field on how students are using Khanmigo to make their learning personal and practical to themselves. So the left-hand side shows you how a student was asking Khanmigo some doubts and stayed on topic, which he hadn't understood in this case, even though the class had moved forward. So instead of just kind of losing that student completely and that topic never really finding its way down into that student's mind, in this case, because he had Khanmigo, he was able to really get to the depth of the problems that he had on that topic and was able to clear his doubts. In the middle one, what you're seeing is the Khanmigo was able to suggest an experiment using some very basic props that were available in the classroom. Some kits were available which were just lying dormant, not being used, defunct, and Khanmigo was able to teach the students on how to use it to conduct an experiment. In this case, they're trying to see how oxygen is used for combustion. Students also used it to create plays and poems to learn mathematical concepts and help their class, and their fellow students, also. So another interesting one. Here's another example where students on the left-hand side was using Khanmigo to practice higher order questions because he wanted to prepare for IIT, and he was saying, can you give me next level of questions? So the students are able to use it to get to the next level. Those who are behind grade level, they're able to use it to remediate, as the example in the middle shows. And the example to the right is a very interesting one where one student has become so adept at Khanmigo that she became the Khanmigo ambassador and was teaching the other students in a classroom on how to use Khanmigo. A very interesting case study that we found. And I'm going to just end the conversation with playing this one.
हाय, मैं हूँ खानविगो, आपका डिजिटल टीचिंग असिस्टेंट फ्रॉम खान अकेडमी।
मेरा नाम सदाम सर।
मेरा नाम अंजू है। मेरा नाम आरती है। मेरा नाम रेणु श्रीवास्तव है।
चलिए कुछ शिक्षकों से मिलते हैं, बिल्कुल आपके जैसे।
बड़ी शिक्षिका के पद पर मैं कार्यरत हूँ।
मैं मैथ्स पढ़ाती हूँ। मैं KGBB नकाम में मैथ्स टीचर। खान अकेडमी ने एक अच्छा टूल बनाया है Khanmigo।
रेटिंग से रिलेटेड जो चीजें हैं वो रुब्रिक के भीतर। तो टेस्ट पेपर जैसे 10 मार्क्स का, तो वो 10 मार्क्स का टेस्ट पेपर हमें जो Khanmigo का ये टूल अपने ज्ञान को रिक्वेस्ट करें, वहां से हमें फिल करता है।
Yes, my knowledge, ये जो फीचर है इससे हमें बहुत ज्यादा बेनिफिट हुआ। जैसे हम किसी चैप्टर को पढ़ाते हैं तो उसके बारे में कुछ जानकारी हमको भी नहीं होती है, तो एट वंस तुरंत ही हम उसमें डालते हैं और तुरंत हमें उसके बारे में पता चल जाता है।
क्लास स्नैपशॉट का टूल वो है जिसमें जैसे हमारे बच्चे ने 7 दिन में कैसी क्या पढ़ाई, ये सारा डेटा करेगी।
असाइनमेंट की अनुशंसा में सर इस बच्चे को किस तरह का असाइनमेंट असाइन कर सकते हैं, उसके लिए है।
Khanmigo जैसे हम जो यूज कर रहे हैं उससे सर सबसे पहली बात तो सर समय की बचत है। तो बच्चे सर ग्रुप में खुद बांट के Khanmigo दे।
अब वो अपने को इंजीनियर, साइंटिस्ट, इस तरह डॉक्टर देखने, मतलब वो सपने उनको आने लग गए हैं और उनको ये लगता है कि मैं कर सकती हूँ और मैं कर सकती हूँ वाला भाव अगर आ जाए तो बच्चे खुशी लगता है।
I will stop sharing. Okay, how do I do that? I think I've lost my Zoom window. I'm just stopping sharing. Just give me 1 second. I think that should work. Yeah, we're back. So any questions, any comments, feedback?
So I think Soumya, you can take up questions one by one from the Q&A window, right?
Yes, I can do that. Yes. So thank you for the talk. We have some questions in the chat. I'll start off with that. The first one we have is what percentage of students across the pilot schools continue to be active users? That is at least 15 minutes of engagement every day after 2 or 3 months of being introduced to Khanmigo. You're muted, Swati. Yeah.
It varies a lot from system to system. In some systems, we are seeing less than about 10% students staying active. And in some systems, we are seeing up to 30% to 40% students staying active. And it does build over time. So far, we have not been in the field long enough in any given pilot. Each one of them were short pilots. And so the tech adoption curve that it follows is very similar to what the EdTech adoption curve is. So Khan Academy, I'll give you that example. When we deploy it at scale in any state partner, it takes up to good 2 to 3 years for the penetration to really happen, where enough number of and percentage of students are using Khan Academy for long enough dosage that we want them to use it for. So Khanmigo, which is a whole another level of tech tool, we should expect no different. And so far, we've not had second year of deployment in any of our pilots and systems. So it's too early to say. In the first year, most of the time goes in just deployment, in helping them understand, get familiar, how to use Khan Academy. So it's not a good measure to see, okay, what percent of the students in the first year were using it for that much amount of time. I think it's a little unreasonable for anyone to expect that students would get to that level of deep engagement in the first year using an AI tool when you don't even see that happen on an EdTech tool. So just want to kind of put that out there.
Actually, unless somebody puts a question in as an anonymous attendee, we mention who the question is from. So this one was from Suhail Bidani. Hi, Suhail. Yeah, Soumya, go ahead.
Great, I'll keep that in mind. The next one is an anonymous question. So it is Swati, great presentation. Any difference in the learnings and outcomes in pilots in India versus those in the US?
Again, you mean the learning of the pilots are almost exactly the same, by the way. That's the interesting bit. So even when I look at the top use cases, very similar across the board. So the students in India are not very different from students outside of India is basically what we are seeing. And the teachers, very similar. The teachers abroad are also using it for the same top 10 use cases, the top 4 use cases as they are in India. So that's been a very interesting insight for us that what we are finding in India is no different from anywhere else in the world.
Interesting. We have another anonymous question which says, how do you determine the linkage between multiple engagements with Khanmigo on a specific topic to enhance learning outcomes? So the causality of it.
Sorry, Soumya, can you repeat the last question?
How do you determine the linkage between multiple engagement with Khanmigo when they are on a specific topic and connected to enhance learning outcomes?
Right. So the data that I was showing you, that kind of basically shows you that the students who are using it for longer, they are getting more questions correct on the exercises that they're attempting on Khan Academy platform. So we are seeing that correlation between students who are engaging longer and are able to solve problems and move forward. So there is a very clear correlation there.
Okay. And the last question is from Priyanka Bharatwaj. She asks, just wondering if some teachers feel overwhelmed with new tool usage, as it's a change in how they manage a learning environment. I'm curious how you approach change management in the short term for a new teacher.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It does happen as one would expect. And the teachers are very heavily bombarded lot, unfortunately. They have enough going on and more, both on the administration side and on the teaching front. Every day there's more tools being thrown at them. And Khanmigo is another tool that's being thrown at them. In addition, but luckily it comes as integrated within Khan Academy. So maybe one can step back and say, okay, when Khan Academy was thrown at them as a tool, because when Khanmigo got added, it was not seen as an added tool. It was just one of the features of Khan Academy platform that just seems to be this amazing, wonderful feature, which makes their life easier. So they saw Khanmigo more as a enabler and a feature which just makes my life easier. But yes, when Khan Academy, the platform itself, is being deployed, it does come across to many teachers as, oh no, yet another thing for me to look at. Which is why the adoption curve is very similar to any tech adoption curve. There are some early adopters who understand the value, who see the value, who are able to pick it up. And then there are some quick followers. And then over time, then there are and there'll always be people who are feeling overwhelmed. We provide as much handholding as possible to help them at least get acquainted with it and start using it just enough to be able to know what the value is and to be able to see what the value is. So when we talk about change management, what we do is a couple of things. So one, we let them pick it up at their pace, which is why the program is a 5-year program. The behavior change cannot be driven overnight, and we don't expect that either. We don't design our program with that expectation and that assumption. We expect the teachers to take time to have that behavior change. And we want them to pick it up because they see value in it. And that happens. To drive that, there are a couple of things that we do. One, we provide a lot of teacher training for them to visually see and demonstratively see what it can do for them. So that helps to get a lot of these early adopters to start using it. And not just teacher trainings in the form of one-time training, but throughout the year in different forms, online, offline, webinars, ask each other questions, ask me anything, peer learning, all of that. And if none of that is enough, we also run a call center. So there's enough and more hand-holding that we do for the teachers. So I think that's another big piece. Second piece to drive this whole, seeing the value part that I just talked about is campaigns. We nudge that behavior through giving them incentives to use it, even though it's a little extra effort initially. But just like any new good tool which is productive and which will eventually make us more productive, initially you require that breaking of inertia, and hence we require that extra nudge to pick it up and use it. Only when you use it is when you realize the value of it. So that initial habit formation is very important, and we kind of nudge that through various campaigns, incentives, rewards, and recognitions. So all of that helps to drive that initial use, and the initial use then drives the perception of value, which then drives the further adoption. And once you have these certain level of teachers, certain percent of teachers who are using it, then there are other teachers who haven't yet picked it up, who are just waiting on the sidelines and watching. They see what it's doing for the other teachers, and the word of mouth spreads also. So there's a spillover effect. So we use a combination of all of these factors, which, as you would expect in any typical change management for it to drive. But the most important lever, as I said, is time, right? You give them enough time to do it and not push it down their throats in year one or within the first 6 months. I think that's the key. That's really the key.
Thank you. The next question is from Sunita Krishnan. She asked, do you have any data on teacher-student comfort with digital tools to begin with? And is there a correlation with their engagement with Khanmigo based on that?
Sorry, just repeat the question one more time.
So if the students and teachers are more comfortable with digital tools, do you see a correlation with their increased engagement on Khanmigo?
Oh, absolutely. So interestingly enough, when Khan Academy, so we always start with Khan Academy deployment in the field, and Khanmigo we bring in later. We don't in all of these deployment pilots where we've deployed Khanmigo, most of them had Khan Academy already running over there. There were a couple of pilots where Khan Academy and Khanmigo were deployed together. So Akanksha is one example where both of them came in together. But so different experiences on both sides. I'll talk about each. On the first set of pilots where Khan Academy was already deployed in these places, when Khan Academy was being deployed the first time, we actually, it helped. One of the side effects of deployment of Khan Academy, a tech platform, which the idea was to help drive maths and science learning in a teacher-directed manner, of course. But as a side effect, what we saw was it was driving digital literacy uptake. So the teachers and students were getting more digitally literate because of this use case of having to use technology to learn better. In essence, made them more aware of how to log in, how to use the internet, how to use the screens for positive uses, such as to learn, things like that. And we saw that happen in a very large at a very large scale, where the students were going to their homes in their holidays and exposing their other siblings to look what you can do with a smartphone. You can learn using a smartphone and not just watch YouTube videos. So there's a digital literacy piece that came along with Khan Academy deployment when the EdTech platform was being deployed. And we saw that when we later on brought in Khan Migo, those teachers who were already good users of Khan Academy, they picked up Khan Migo faster than the others. So absolutely a very strong correlation there as well that we saw. Not necessarily in the form of numbers, but we just saw in the form of anecdotes. And in those schools where we saw teachers were better users of Khan Academy, we saw the same schools better users of Khan Migo as well. So that's kind of how we saw it, and not in a proper research M&E study, because it's too early for that. Then in the second case where Khan Academy and Khan Migo were deployed together, over there, same thing. You saw the example where this one student who was the Khan Migo ambassador and was teaching the other students how to use Khan Migo. This girl, she became a lot more digitally literate and a lot faster than her peer group. And she was very adept at using smartphones. She became adept at using smartphones. I wouldn't say she was to begin with. And she was able to access Khan Academy platform very quickly and click on the Khan Migo button and start using Khan Migo. And because she became so good at it, then she was able to teach the others as well. So there is a very strong correlation between digital literacy and use of Khan Migo, but more importantly, a strong correlation between deployment of Khan Academy EdTech platform and building of digital literacy skills.
Thank you. I think this next question is also kind of related, which is that if a student faces difficulties in learning different topics, how are they accessing Khan Migo, and how do they get access to different activities to enable them to learn better? So you actually had mentioned how they interact and how the engagement has increased. This is more into the details of how that process takes place. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'll start again with re-emphasizing what I said in the beginning, which is the Khan Migo access is teacher directed. Just like Khan Academy platform access is teacher directed in these public school systems in India. So the teacher creates an e-classroom, rosters the students, and then assigns to the students the content from the Khan Academy platform, which could be a combination of videos in math on the topic that is being taught in that week by the teacher, exercises that the teacher would want the students to practice on to really pick up skills and learn skills in math and science, or unit tests for that matter. So the teacher assigns content to the students, and then the students are given certain time to log in individually using their own individual login on any device they have access to in school, at home, any tablet, computer, ICT lab, whatever they are able to access. And then they see the moment they log in that the teacher has assigned this to you. So it's very directed by the teacher, so that then the student knows what to practice, what to study, and stays on that topic which is being taught in the classroom. So that's kind of how the general learning process works. But there are a lot of other deviations that do happen, and flexibility, because of flexibility that is provided to the students by the platform's design. For example, if the student is done with a particular exercise, or let's take a different example. The student is really struggling with a particular exercise. Then not only can the student use different hints to reattempt it and understand where they are stuck and what the lacuna in their understanding and fundamentals might be on that particular topic. They can also use Khan Migo if the Khan Migo is available to that particular system and is deployed in their classroom to that student. Then the student is able to use the Khan Migo to say, oh, help me with this exercise. I'm really stuck here. I don't know how to proceed. My teacher assigned me this exercise. In fact, the student doesn't even have to say any of that. The Khan Migo knows that the teacher, because it has contextual knowledge, because it's sitting on top of Khan Academy EdTech platform, it knows what the teacher has assigned to the student. It knows the grade of the student. It knows exactly what the topic is being discussed in the classroom. So that contextual background is very, very useful for any AI tutor to have to enable student learning, because then you're enabling that learning in a very relevant manner, relevant to the curriculum and what is being taught and what the teacher is recommending the student needs to learn. So it's keeping the human in the middle of it because of that context. So then this Khanmigo is able to help the student figure out how to do that exercise better by asking questions, by helping the student engage with Khanmigo and on that particular topic more deeply. And that's where the Socratic conversation really happens and the productive struggle happens. So sometimes the student says, okay, I'm done. I don't want, this is too much. Just give me the answer. And Khanmigo won't give the answer. But it's very, in an encouraging manner, it'll keep pushing the student to think a little bit, maybe give a little bit of a hint here and there, release a little bit of the information so that they don't lose the student completely. So it understands all of that. So that's how a majority of the learning actually happens. In some cases, the student is behind, then the Khanmigo is able to help. Okay, you don't understand if the question is about adding two fractions, but the student doesn't even know what fractions are. The Khanmigo will go one step back and help the student understand what the fractions really are. What's a numerator? What's a denominator? Just as an example. So that's a whole one aspect of learning using Khanmigo in a teacher-directed manner. There's a whole another piece, which is the teacher is able to look at the performance data on a teacher dashboard using Khanmigo, and Khanmigo is able to help the teacher figure out, your students, here is how your students stacked up. These group of students, this group of students needs remediation. They're not even at this level. They need help on the subtopic of this. What is a fraction? These group of students, they are okay. They can, you can give them next level of questions as a next step. And these other students, they did it very quickly. They've mastered it. They need the next level of chat. And by click of a button, Khanmigo is able to then assign next level of content to these students in a differentiated manner. But again, teachers always stays informed and can change that assignment, can change and edit at any point in time. So that's the second way in which the learning really happens. There's a third way, which is little bit of a self-directed effort. The student, because they are logged in and let's say they've done the exercise the teacher has given, they want to learn something else, they can always click on this Khanmigo, help tutor me. My exams are coming up. I want to learn a little bit more. I want to practice this topic. I want to feel more secure on this particular topic. I don't understand permutation combination as well as I would like to, and I would like some review exercises. Give me some review exercises. Help test my knowledge. So the student is also able to, and again, Khanmigo knows what the student's level is, what they're studying, which grade they're in, because it understands what the students which class the student is rostered into. So it has that context. It has learned from the student's previous interactions what the student really needs, how the student would understand better. Maybe the student is interested in Bollywood or cricket. It's able to use those examples to help drive the learning in a way that's more engaging for the student. So that's a third way in which the learning happens. So there's quite a few different ways in which Khanmigo is able to drive learning for a student. And these are just a few examples. Sorry for going too much into detail, but I thought the question was detailed. I think it was seeking more details. So I took the liberty to dive a little bit in.
Thank you.
So Swati, I have a question. I think that was a wonderful answer. And I have something that slightly touches upon that. So have you been able to understand a little bit more about how students learn? Right? Like, how does learning occur of a certain concept? I'm not sure if fractions might be too simple, but let's say you're talking about one of my favorite examples is find angle X in a figure, right? So there are a bunch of concepts that the students need to understand to do that. Some of it might just be, some of the angles in a triangle is 180, or there could be a combination of concepts they have to draw on, right? And so from the data that you have in terms of the interactions of the students with Khanmigo and so on, are you able to figure out, for instance, how should a teacher teach a topic better, right? This is how we've been teaching it, but that doesn't seem to be working. Khanmigo says this would be the right way to teach it.
Yeah. No, very, very interesting question, Karthik. Thank you for asking. In fact, interestingly enough, there are a couple of things that I want to share with you here on this one. One, because we have so much data on when the students use hints for doing exercises, Khan Academy has a very strong understanding as a platform of what are the typical areas where student gets stuck on any given topic. So we already know that. The platform already knows that. And that knowledge has been used to train Khanmigo. So Khanmigo knows what are some of the typical errors students make, or typical areas where the students kind of lack that clarity on a given topic. And it's able to bring that up in its conversations with the students. So we've seen that happen because it's trained that way. So that's something that does happen, yes.
So is there a way that we can get this knowledge to the teachers, right? To help them teach better, and I know that there are some things that you personalize and you have ways to train teachers as well and so on. But could this also be sort of piped towards the teachers?
Absolutely, and it already does in the form of the 2-3 features that are there, tools that are there on Khanmigo's landing page for teachers. One is lesson planning and lesson hooks and activities. So those are I'm just picking 3 areas, but there are quite a few other prompts as well that can be used for teachers to become better at teaching a particular topic. So the teacher can use any of these 3 to say, I have to teach this topic next week in my class. Help me figure out how to teach it more effectively. And Khanmigo, using its knowledge that it's been trained on, will tell the teachers, start this way, clarify this particular part using this example, and then move to the next level. And so it's able to guide the teacher on what to do, how to do it. Then teacher can, of course, come back and edit that lesson plan as well. So it's very, very thoughtfully written out if you see any example of any lesson plan. And similarly, lesson hooks, it gives some very interesting lesson hooks for engaging students because they know, Khanmigo knows where the teachers will typically lose a student on this topic, right? Where the boredom starts to hit, or just, it becomes a little bit much to handle, cognitive load increases. So Khanmigo knows that, so it's able to provide lesson hooks and activities using that knowledge that is being trained on. So in some ways, it is already being served to the teachers it's kind of using all that information and insights and then putting it all together to then serve it on a platter to the teachers. But of course, in an engaging manner, teachers can obviously come back and edit it to make it even more contextual for themselves. But they are getting guided by Khanmigo. That's the whole teacher tool concept. That's basically what the teacher assistant does when Khanmigo acts as a teacher assistant for the teachers.
Wonderful. Thanks. Soumya, you may want to go back to the other question.
Great. So I think we covered most of the questions, and I'm just browsing through it. So maybe from CeRAI side, I can ask, you mentioned safety a lot in the presentation about how the students are protected. So we see it from more of an academic lens. So I was curious about the on-ground experiences you have, what safeguards you've thought of, how students engage, how teachers engage. I know, for example, from what you mentioned, that having the teacher hand holding the experience is a part of the safety process. So I was curious, what are the other ways maybe we as algorithm developers need to be careful of how things are deployed in the field? Yeah.
No, absolutely. And you're right, Soumya. It does, to me, the biggest part where the safety comes in is by making the deployment or the implementation human directed, which has nothing to do with tool design. Of course, tool design has to keep that assumption in mind when it's being designed. It has to be amenable to being deployed in a way that it's human centric and human directed. Of course, that's there. But to me, this is less to do with tool design, more to do with how it's implemented in the field. And so this safety feature comes from how it's implemented, and we implement it through teacher directed ways. That's where a large part of safety gets taken care of. Then there's another piece, which is the tool design aspect, the training of the tool. Because of the learning science that Khan Academy has, we're an education organization, so we have a lot of knowledge on what are some of the untoward behaviors students typically engage in, unsafe behaviors. What are some signs of potential unsafe behavior, if not today, but how do I know the student is exhibiting those signs? What are some red flags? So all of that knowledge is being used to train the tutor, and the tutor keeps track of the student engagement and interactions. And the moment it sees some of those triggers, it's able to trigger a red flag to the teacher. So the teacher is able to get alerts from the system. The teacher can also take a look at and download the entire student interaction when they want to. I'll give a very classic example on safety. In Brazil, when Khanmigo was being deployed, there was one instance where Khanmigo was able to alert the teacher on certain types of questions that a student was asking, which were very indicative of a potentially unsafe behavior and not a good space the student was in mentally. And it was a case of mental health disorder, and the student was considering and moving towards very grave self-harm type situations. And the teacher had no idea. Nobody, students, the peer group, nobody had any idea. But Khanmigo was able to find it and identify it and alerted the teacher, and the teacher was able, and teacher stepped in, parents were called, and so the right steps were of course taken, and that potential student safety hazard was averted. So very, very good classic example from the field on how this is playing out.
Thank you so much. I think that's the time we have for the questions. So I hand it back over to Hemant sir to chair the rest of the session. Thank you again, Swati.
Soumya, can I log off?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks
Thank you so
everybody for
much.
listening. Thanks for
Thanks a lot, Swati.
taking the time on a
Thank you.
Saturday. Thank you.
Thanks you.
After a nice talk, what was even nicer to see that there was so much interaction, and which is a hallmark of a good webinar, I guess. So let's continue the interaction through a conversation between Professor Karthik Raman and Professor Mitesh. Mitesh, I suppose, will be joining shortly, but I'm pretty sure Karthik can take it forward until he joins. So let me introduce our participants of the conversation. Professor Karthik Raman is professor at Department of Data Science and AI at Wadhwani School of Data Science and AI, WSI, at IIT Madras. His research group employs three-pronged strategy, combining networks, models, and AI with applications spanning microbiome systems biology, silico-metabolic engineering, and biological big data analysis. He also coordinates the Center for Integrative Biology and Systems Medicine at IIT Madras. He's deeply invested in teaching and mentoring. He teaches first-year undergraduate courses as well as advanced courses in computational systems biology. He's also authored textbook on computational systems biology. Beyond his core research and teaching, Karthik is actively engaged with emerging landscape of AI literacy and education. You will hear some of it through the conversation. He served on the expert committee that developed the CBSE Computational Thinking and AI curriculum for classes 3 to 8, rolling out nationally now in 2026 and 27. He's contributed to AI Samarth, a national initiative that aims to empower students, teachers, and parents across India to engage with AI meaningfully, safely, and responsibly. Professor Mitesh Kapra, Associate Professor at IIT Madras, has been named the Time Magazine's 2025 list of 100 most influential people in AI. He's recognized for his pioneering work in natural language processing and machine learning. He's made significant contributions to advancing AI for India's diverse population, linguistically diverse population. His work focuses on building AI systems that understand and process India's 22 official languages. One of Mitesh's most impactful initiatives is AI for Bharat, an open source project that builds databases, tools, and models for all 22 official languages of India. And currently, he's faculty in charge of Bodhan.AI, a digital public infrastructure for AI-powered education in India. It focuses on intersection of AI, education, and national level impact. one of the first initiatives aims to equip teachers with practical AI skills to enhance classroom teaching and build AI-ready educators. So we're very pleased to have Mitesh and Karthik engaged in a conversation about AI responsibly to reimagine AI for education. So I would like to hand over to Karthik and Mitesh now.
Okay, thanks a lot, Hemant. I think Mitesh is still, wrapping up his other session. So I will get started and start sharing some of my thoughts, on some of the very exciting challenges that are facing us today, as we are essentially in a, in the new in the AI future, right? So I don't think we should call it the AI future any longer. It's already the AI present. And the challenge ahead of us is that the question, therefore, is not if should we train our students in AI, but the question is how do we best train our students in AI, right? And for this, as part of the CBSE committee that was looking at computational thinking and AI and from classes 3 to 8, we thought computational thinking should be the central focus of education that ultimately leads to AI, right? And also integrated gently alongside mathematics and also the world around us and so on. Basically show students that it's not just important in math, but it can help you break down and solve problems in various domains. And the idea is to focus on the key aspects of computational thinking, right? So the idea is to decompose problems, and this seems to actually be like a big strength of our AI tools, by the way, right? And not that it's a prerequisite for understanding AI tools, but I think if you want to really understand AI, this becomes quite important. So how do you decompose problems? And then pattern recognition, quite a lot of abstraction, right? And children like doing this because there's a lot of puzzles to be solved and so on. And also algorithmic thinking. But it also helps them develop the skills to really think about difficult problems. And it's not just about the problem being per se very hard. It's just like the problem has so many different constraints. And a classic example that we often talk about is suppose you're given a bunch of numbers, right? How do you pick the digits from that using certain constraints, right? You cannot repeat a digit, you cannot, and so on. How do you pick a number that's like really large? So the student has to actually balance a lot of constraints in their mind and break the problem down, right? So what is the first digit I should pick? What is the second digit I should pick? And so on and so forth. And this helps the students structure their thinking, right? So that actually becomes the core strength that they will eventually start developing, right? So this happens to be one of the most important aspects of bringing computational thinking. And there are research studies that have shown that computational thinking can actually be the foundation for AI. I just had a discussion, comment from one of my collaborators was saying that, do we need to think what happens if we start teaching AI first, right? Could it lead to a completely different way of thinking about these problems and so on? While those kinds of questions are interesting thoughts, looks like there is a lot of evidence that computational thinking can help students approach difficult problems. And while at this, the other standard question that we often get is, do we need to already teach AI, right? And how do you teach difficult concepts at an early stage of school and so on? And here, the key driving principle behind this is the idea of what is known as a spiral curriculum. This was pioneered by Jerome Bruner. He lived from 1915 to 2016, for 100 years, and I think he had an office at NYC even when he was like 98 or something. And Jerome Bruner had this concept of having a spiral curriculum, which is like, as long as you don't sow misconceptions, it's a great idea to peel a particular concept layer by layer, right? So you can teach different types of AI to a 6th grader, 7th grader, and 8th grader. and keep incrementally adding detail and adding difficulty and concepts and so on as you go on, right? And it slowly primes their mind to appreciate and ultimately understand these concepts more deeply. So this, I think, is one of the again, design principles that we had for the curriculum. So Soumya, if you want, feel free to interrupt. I don't know if there are questions coming, but I invite people to also ask questions if they have any queries and thoughts about this entire process. But the broad idea is this, right? So we posit that CT is the cognitive, the computational thinking is the cognitive scaffolding for AI literacy, and this has been shown in past research. And we also want to keep it fairly unplugged. This was also, a discussion that I think the Khan Academy folks were having, not in Swati's talk, but even before, right? So what is the level of tech that you can have in class? And this is again a question that we will have for Mitesh in terms of how do we handle tech in class. But as far as the CBSE curriculum is concerned, it is mostly unplugged. In the sense, and it's also platform independent, and the focus is not on tools, because this is one major worry that a lot of us have as parents and as teachers, which is there is a lot of conflation of AI training or AI literacy or knowledge of AI being conflated with the ability to use various tools, right? And in fact, the biggest challenge that we have is that the students have already started using these tools. They don't know what AI is. You get one of these LLMs spouting very, very hyper confident, wrong stuff potentially, and they just don't have the wherewithal to understand if that's right or wrong and so on. So one of the most important things is that we need to teach the children to question AI, right? And they need to understand, we need to demystify AI for them, so that they have this, they don't treat AI as some, magic wand or like a black box that they just admire because it's so fast and so cool as it seems. But they need to really be able to break it down, understand what underlies it, and ultimately be able to question it very critically, right? And with this, the other challenges are basically this is not just coding, right? So a lot of people think, can this just be like a coding class? And if you see, there is very little coding. I think even till maybe class 8, there is an introduction to coding. Although we want to introduce block coding in class 6 or 7, it might eventually happen. But if you see the entire progression of the curriculum from class 3 to class 8 doesn't really rely upon coding or even computer access. And in classes 3, 4, 5, it's highly non-tech. In that, it's just problem solving, puzzle solving, right? So how do you basically make so solve these pattern puzzles, right? What comes next in a sequence? And where you have to see the various complex, you may need to count the number of dots that are changing, some rotational symmetries, all of these things, right? And these are classic computational thinking skills that help students eventually prepare for abstracting more complex concepts and so on, right? So these are some of the things that are really helpful when you slowly construct the foundation of computational thinking and ultimately slowly build towards AI literacy and then AI skills and so on, right? And ultimately, we want at least a few students, and this is potentially after higher education, where they can actually become AI developers and so on. And this is really changing fast, because I've had high school interns who've already been using PyTorch and things like that. So it's high time that we start encouraging students, especially those that are able to pick these up, to start honing their skills and preparing for this inevitability. So that is something that I wanted to mention. And there are also, other challenges, right? How do you, for example, when Hemant was introducing, he was mentioning about AI Samarth, right? So what is AI literacy, right? And this is another very important aspect that we need to look at, because we've time and again said this, that students have started using AI left, right, and center, right? And they do not know what they are using. So can we actually give them some meaningful content that they can chew on and ultimately understand a little bit more about what they're using, right? So having it formally as part of the school curriculum is great, but we started this AI Samarth initiative well before that. And we are hoping something like AI Samarth could be like a bridge course for all the students who are currently in higher classes, who haven't been exposed to these in lower classes and so on. So how do we help them appreciate what's underlying AI, right? And the idea for this is to have multiple pillars. So you start with the foundational basics of AI and so on. But very importantly, and especially in the context of CeRAI and so on, teach them the notions of ethics, bias, and so on, right? So what are the aspects of responsible AI that they need to understand? So if you look at both AI Samarth and also the CBSE curriculum, there is a lot of interweaving of ethics and ethical concepts all through the curriculum, right? It's not just like an afterthought, you just do it as a last lesson, but try to integrate it in various stages. Of course, this is from class 6th onwards, where where AI really starts coming up into the curriculum. But how do you slowly, show the students what are all the key ethical issues, right? So that could be data-driven biases. That could be so many different biases that are possible in AI systems. So how do you enable them to understand these biases and so on? So this is something that we have looked at it. So I think Suhail has a question. He says, IIT initiated a small study to understand the impact of AI on cognitive development of children. I'm not aware of this study. I mean, we had a study on the use of AI in higher education and so on. And I'm sort of not going to go into that today because we are focused a little bit more on schools. But I'll try to find more details about this, Suhail. That's definitely interesting. But here, I think the one clear thing to emphasize here is that these curricula or these literacy curricula as well, they do not per se emphasize the adoption of AI, right? The adoption of AI is sort of understood, and the idea is to try to demystify it for the students and also, help them know what could be the potential pitfalls and so on. And there are definitely challenges, right? And because this, as one of my colleagues very nicely put it, the LLMs are quite different from any of the other technological tools that we've used in the past. Like say a calculator. A calculator basically automates some mechanical calculations and so on. Whereas in the LLMs have started automating reasoning and cognitive tasks, right? And outsourcing these, especially at a time when there are still children or even students in higher education or even PhD students are still honing their expertise and they are in their formative years in some sense, right? Even while doing their PhD, they are still forming their ability to think critically, think independently, and so on. So at this point, to outsource this to AI, that's a challenge. And they would not have the necessary expertise to verify the output that AI gives them as well. So these are very important challenges that definitely need to be addressed. But the other side of the coin is that you need the students to pick up important skills, right? That helps them understand eventually, if they get into it, the math underlying AI and so on. So the ability to think, to decompose, to abstract, to understand algorithms, that is something which is central to this overall understanding. And so this will be good to put the students through, right? So these are some of the things that we were looking at building into the curriculum so that it enables the students ultimately appreciate, not just, be users of AI, right? We just don't want to create one more generation of people who will just be using, click and point tools without understanding what's happening. But eventually understand more deeply, more fundamentally, how these tools work and when to trust them and to, very importantly, question them. So So these were some of the things that we were really focused on. So Suhail has another good question. So should we carry out an absolutely right? So should we carry out an in-depth longitudinal study about the impact on cognitive development? Uh, uh, I mean, I just hope a lot of children, at least in the 5 to 10 age group, do not use AI, right? At least, all tools require you to be 13 years old to use them. So it is, of course, I'm sure that there are people or parents who just try to simply. Sorry, was there a question? Okay, I think this is some background noise. So the thing is, we expect that only students above the age of 13, so this would be like, say, so class 7 onwards, actually start using AI. Of course, we know this, a few younger students also use AI. But in the age group of 5 to 10, I hope that we completely, insulate the students from at least LLMs. It might be okay if they use some tech, right, in terms of watching some videos or something like that. But in terms of just plain interaction with LLMs or building essays and so on, this would definitely be a challenge. Yeah, I'm not sure how do we conduct the study, because we are not supposed to use the LLMs, right? So there will be I think ethical challenges in even designing the study is what I would imagine. But I think in higher classes, this is definitely needed. And there are some studies that have been conducted, and I can share that. So there is this whole challenge of cognitive surrender that people have been talking about, and so on, where the over reliance on AI has actually made some of these students, at least in some of those test cohorts, they were really not able to, their mathematical ability had suffered and things like that. So I can probably post a link to that study in the chat at some point of time when Mitesh is talking and so on. So these are some of the things that we've been grappling with. Soumya, are there any other questions that we want to look at?
I think the questions in the chat are done. I think Professor Mitesh has joined. I just wanted to give a shout out.
Okay, I still don't see him in the panelists.
I think there are two Nitis, so I think one of them is Mitesh. So I'm not sure. I'm just doing the housekeeping.
Okay.
But maybe I can ask a question until then, which is that you mentioned in AI Samarth about the AI literacy, and I was thinking about the stakeholders. I think we went in depth with teachers and students, but I was wondering, is there any effort for AI literacy for parents? And I was curious about that.
Yeah. So the idea is to also look at parents eventually, right? So the focus is obviously started off with students and then teachers, so teacher training, and I think this is very important, right? So for in terms of reinforcing things and so on, right? So if students are taught not to do something in school and the parents just let them ignore them as they do that at home and so on, it's going to be a challenge. So that reinforcement has to definitely come from parents. And parents should also eventually understand that these are not, black boxes and things like that. So that's definitely something that we will be doing as part of AI Samarth. Yeah.
Okay, and maybe I could ask another one regarding academic integrity, and I think that's a challenge for most educators at this point, which is how do we actually assess, even in interviews, maybe it need not even be educators, I think even tech interviews, all of it is now grappling with this technology, which is both a boon and it makes you redesign how you do things. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, so this is definitely a big challenge in the sense that it has upended how we do assessments, right? So I've had to rethink how I do assessments in class. I've had to downweight certain assignments, have a few, assignment-based exams in lieu of actual assignments and so on. And I eventually feel that this should improve over years, right? Because I think people will start realizing I don't think there's much value in continuously pretending you're better than who you are. right? And that's what AI lets you do. And it might, there may be a few short-term payoffs for students and so on, but I think they'll have to quickly. This is just like I just hope that they, live up to the honor codes. And but there are a few challenges here, and one thing that I think is like really crucial is that all academic institutions must actually out an AI policy. Right? They should put out an AI policy which says what is acceptable use, what is unacceptable use. Right. So at least it's not just vague. And I had students asking me in my course, right? This is 2026 and you're not letting us use AI. Right. And this is after I have expressly allowed them to use AI for writing and for that project, coding for the project, but not coding for the assignments. Right. So that is the place where I draw the line between what is acceptable AI use and what is not acceptable AI use, because of how I want training to happen in my course. Right. I believe I would have the freedom. So, but I think it's important for institutions to have a broader framework and have other people, including instructors or school teachers or whatever, plug into that framework. And I remember one of my colleagues was telling me, right, there were some schools that in 2022 they already put out an AI use policy of how students can or cannot use AI for essay writing and things like that. And I think this is important, and I don't think there's enough of this happening really. And even at IIT Madras, we are just, we've constituted, we've made a few draft policies, but we still haven't, made a firm public policy on the use of AI and acceptable use of AI in research, teaching, and so on.
Thank you. And,
So I think Mitesh is here. So nice. So hi Mitesh. Very happy to have you here. So we've just been having some discussions about the AI in schools and so on. But I think now we would just move to talking about the Bodhan, right? Now that you're here. So some of the questions that we wanted to really talk about was we keep seeing a lot of tech use, and one meaningful tech use was just discussed earlier today by Swati from Khan Academy, where she talked about the use of Khan Miko. But there are many AI systems that look impressive and so on, but they do not generally improve learning, right? So what do you think are the key features or factors that would separate those that really assist learning from those that don't? What do you think are the main challenges?
Yeah. So I think as we put this digital technology in the hands of students, right, it is very important to distinguish between two types of metrics, right? One is engagement metrics and the other is learning metrics, right? Engagement metrics is what people track on social media, number of monthly active users, the amount of time spent every day on the platform, number of interactions done, and so forth, right? Those don't necessarily translate into learning outcomes, right? So what is important is that when we are designing these systems, we should have clearly measurable outcomes in mind, which are grounded in the kind of impact that we want on the ground, right? We don't want children to come and spend 1 hour with the bot and not learn anything, right? That's an engagement farming sort of a setup, which makes sense for social media, does not make sense for education, right? So the first step is to have a very, very clear sense of what the measurable outcomes are, right? The second is to understand that while this is a new technology, it does not necessarily have to compete or throw away all the education wisdom that has been around for so many years. And I'm talking about learning science principles, right? So when you're we don't want these so-called tutor bots to become answer giving vending machines, right? So these are not that you have a question, you come here, you ask me a question, and I'll give you an answer and you're done, right? It has to be grounded in learning science principles, where things like Socratic pedagogy is important, things like creating the right scaffolding is important, giving a level appropriate hints is important. Also, when you're doing assessments, following things like Bloom's taxonomy, having spaced repetition, uh, doing metacognition, right? How confident are you about what you have learned and so on, right? So all of this has to be embedded. It cannot just be a chatbot, right? So today, I think when I see, in fact, even my kids, when they're using these tools for their homeworks, etc., they are operating in the chat mode, or rather using them as answer vending machines, right? So you give a question, you get an answer, and I'm done. My homework is done, right? And of course, most of the usage is around uh, some things which lie between curriculum and extra curriculum, which is like projects and so on, right? And okay, I want to write this report, I want to write this presentation, just tell me what I should go and do, right? That is not appropriate, right? So we have to make sure that these are not chatbots, but these are tools grounded in pedagogy, learning science principles, and these are tools which are working towards measurable outcomes, right? And these outcomes also have to be kept in mind, right? So one of the things that is important is equity, right? So why are we going after, why are we so optimistic about AI, right? So what AI can do is what coaching centers do, but it can do it at scale, right? It can give you high quality teaching, it can give you personalized feedback, and it can give you very patient, continuous assessment and very patient feedback, right? This is what coaching centers have mastered, but AI can do it at scale, right? So while it does that, the important metric is equity, right? So we are not looking at a few exceptional students becoming even more exceptional. It's the overall sort of base which has to come up, right? So whatever is the lowest base, the weakest student in the class, that has to rise up, right? So that's the measurable outcome, one of the measurable outcomes that we should look for. So in summary, have very, very clear measurable outcomes. Don't throw away the wisdom of education which has been built over so many years, right? Which is the learning science principles. And think of that these as augmenters and not replacers, right? So this is not saying that, hey, your school system is screwed up, you cannot learn anything in the school education system. Here's a parallel education system. You attend your 4 hours of school, but then your real learning will happen. That's not the way. Yeah? We are not replacing teachers. Teachers are central to this. Human interactions are central to education. So this is a teacher augmentation tool and a student augmentation tool, not really a replacement of the education system, right? So that has to be kept in mind.
Great. I think that's very well put, and that really say also plugs into what we plan to hopefully do at Bodhan.AI. So
Yeah.
the next question for you is on that front, right? So so at a national scale, what would be like? What do you think would be an ideal proof of impact for Bodhan.AI? What is
Yeah.
it that we would have want to have achieved?
Yeah. So I think again we need to be clear about the metrics, and there are few already, well understood metrics in this space, right? For example, foundational literacy and numeracy. How many students at grade 5 read at the level of grade 5? And that's a metric to be tracked, and that has to improve, right? Then we have gross enrollment ratios, right? How many students are going beyond their school education and enrolling into college? What are the dropout rates? And these are typically around the 8th standard, 9th standard mark, where people are don't not even giving the 10th board exam, right? Then similarly, math comprehension. How many students in grade 9 are doing math, which is at the level of their age or grade group, right? And many of these such similar measurable outcomes are there, right? So to do this at population scale, all of these numbers have to move meaningfully, right? Again, distinguishing from engagement farming to learning metrics, right? So all of these have to move meaningfully. In the past 20 years or so, since the ASR report came out, the first ASR report came out, I think many of these metrics have not moved, right? So foundational literacy and now numeracy numbers are not very different from what they were 20 years back, right? So for us to make impact at the national scale, these accepted metrics have to move, right? That's the purpose. That's what our focus would be. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And the next question is, how do you combine strong research and deployment at
Uh,
Bodhan, right? So research
yeah.
is something that we are very very good at doing. We've been doing it for decades. But how
Yeah.
do we make sure the deployment happens?
Yeah. No, I think it has to be set up from day one as that you are running it in a way that deployment is almost like within the first 3 months or 6 months of setting up, right? It cannot be that you're going to do research for the next 3 years, build the best technology in your lab, and then go to the schools. It's not going to work like that, right? So it has to be a phased rollout where you already have today already know the 1,000 schools, the first 1,000 schools where you're going to deploy this, right? Like a good representative set across rural, urban, and use those learnings to drive your research, right? So we all feel that, okay, India is a voice first nation, right? And we really need to have multilingual tutor bots which can speak in the native languages, right? This is a good hypothesis, right? But now this has to be validated further, right? Maybe when people are doing STEM, maybe they are more comfortable in talking in English, right? Because that's what the textbook is, especially when we are talking about English medium schools and so on, right? So through these deployments, now we are thinking a lot about whether the students are getting the right answers, whether it is improving their test results and so on, right? If if from day one we don't have a baselining that this is where the students were today, then our entire deployment and research is misguided, right? I mean, where are the students today and where do we want them to be? And the entire research has to be around that, right? And if you're saying that a particular learning science principle is important, what happens with and without it, right? If you don't do it, do you really see that certain students don't get measurable learning outcomes and certain students who were tutored with that learning science principle get it, right? So all of this has to be built in from day one. The goal has to be deployment, and all the research has to be driven by what you see in the deployment, right? It's not the other way around where you
Loop,
research
yeah.
for many years and then you say, okay, now I'm ready to deploy. It has to be like a continuous loop, right? And that's what we are trying to do. We are hoping to sort of get to the ground as early as possible, right? As early as maybe September this year. We just got launched in February-ish, right, this year. So want to get to that deployment cycle very soon, and then use that data to drive all the research that we do.
So suppose you had to just have one or two key priorities for the next year or so. What would they be? What would you prioritize ideally?
Yeah. So I think a few things, right? So one is locking down the measurable outcomes that you're looking for, right? There should not be any ambiguity about what is it that you want to improve. That's one. Second is to do baselining against those metrics, right? Where are we today? If you want foundational literacy and numeracy to improve, where exactly are we today, right? And that is the number that you need to track. The third important thing is, and that's sort of in connection to the AI literacy for teachers program that we just announced, get teachers on board as early as possible, right? So we are very clear that we are not creating a parallel education system. We are creating a teacher augmentation system, right? And for that, it's very important that we onboard teachers as early as possible in what are the ways in which AI can help in their workflows, right? So the sooner the teachers are onboarded, the sooner they start realizing the importance of what is being shared with them, right? Like how much easier it makes their lives. We feel then the dissemination and adoption for students would become much more easier, right? If we have teachers saying, okay, we don't want this, and we directly try to go to the students, that's not what we want to do at all, right? So three things: lock the metrics, do the baselining against those metrics, and then get teachers onboarded as early as possible.
Perfect. So thanks, thanks a lot, Mitesh. I think those were some really interesting thoughts, and really looking forward to what we can do as part of Bodhan over the next few months. So I encourage the participants to type in questions. We still have a few minutes. We'll be happy to take questions for the next few minutes. But in case we don't have questions, I will hand it over to Hemant. But we maybe just give a couple of minutes to the participants to give some questions. Yeah. Hemant, you may want to just share your thoughts or general comments as we wait for the last ditch wait for some participant questions.
No, I think it was very nice to see that both sessions talked about enabling educators and students rather than, as Mitesh said, becoming answer vending machines. So focusing on being understanding and learning augmentation tool at scale. So, and with outcomes and metrics built in, that is very, very essential and heartening to see as focus. So that was the message which came out loud and clear, right? So I think at this stage, and we are past 12 o'clock, so it's been a very engaging conversation. I So time to wrap up. So I represent CeRAI and Bodhan.AI in thanking everybody who worked hard on bringing this webinar to all of us, including Neeti, Soumya, who put together the overall structure, and well, they're also leading the AI education and literacy aspects at CeRAI and working with Bodhan.AI. Again, thanks due to Srivatsan, Setu, Sukanya, who handle communication and event management for us. And of course, there are a lot of people behind the screen who've been working hard at CeRAI and Bodhan.AI, not only bringing this webinar out to the audience. So we'll continue the good work. Of course, finally, thanks to our speakers today, Swati, Mitesh, and Karthik. And last but not the least, the participants who were quite interactive throughout the conversation. So I think the participants will be able to access the recording in a couple of days. We'll inform them when the recording becomes available. So again, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend. And we'll see you in the next edition down the line in a few months' time. Thanks, and saying goodbye now.
Thank you.
Setu, Srivatsan, you can end the session.
Okay, sir.